Thank you for being with us today. We would love to have you join us in person. To partner with us or to give online, go to www.upperroomohio.com. We hope you enjoy this message.
They said Nicole didn't do a good enough job on the first service, so they said it's just going to be me this service. No, I think I made some correction on a little 3-year-old that didn't like it, so she's tending to her right now. So, how are you? Yeah, you guys good? Everybody good? Good. I'm good. Look at this adorable little girl. This young lady who turned 11 a week ago. She's awesome. So, this week is definitely my favorite speaking week of the year. I have other favorite services, like Church on the Lawn's always a fun one, Christmas, Easter, obviously. But this is just a really great one because Nicole and I get to share our heart. So I'll just kind of start and recap where we were the last 2 years. So we do this every year around Valentine's Day. And 2 years ago, and they're all on our Vimeo page or on podcasts, you can find them. 2 years ago, Nicole and I vulnerably shared our marriage testimony. And those of you who don't know, or maybe this is your first week or two here, knew that I had become an atheist, was an abusive person, was a really, really bad man. And before Jesus really encountered me, I was certainly living a different lifestyle than I am now. So we share that. And at 3 years, our marriage was really on the rocks, and we were facing divorce. And God redeemed it. Not only redeemed that, He saved my life. He totally just came in. I mean, He wasn't a gentleman about it. I've heard that, well, God's a gentleman. He'll only give you what you can handle. Nope, not with me. He pretty much threw me on the floor, encountered me with a power, electricity, weeping, and so that changed our life. So we shared that whole story 2 years ago. You can find that on our media platforms. And then the other thing is, last year we shared about basically getting back to another dangerous place. And this is probably more common than where we were the first 3 years of our marriage. And that was, we were saying yes to everything else outside of our home, which meant we were saying no to inside our home. So the power of our yeses and our nos are so critical. And what we learned and what I've realized is, when I said I do, it meant that I say I don't to 1,000 other things. So my I do to her is more powerful than any of the I don'ts that I have to outside of there. So last year we shared about the yeses and the nos, and we shared about what that looked like in our life. And they were righteous things, partnering with Revive and Love Dayton and Declare and all of the Hope Over Heroin and all these things. And we were saying yes to speaking out all over the place. And she was just finished writing her book. And then we ended up in a really dangerous place. So we shared that last year. Where we're really going to go this year and today is, what does it look like, We've been on this series because God planted something in my heart that I want to see revival in our land. I want to see revival in our nation. I want to see revival in our cities, in our workplaces. I want to see revival in this church. I want to see that. But the reality is, if you don't have revival in your home, it doesn't matter if it's anywhere else. If I don't have revival in my home, I don't care about the revival happening in Minneapolis or LA or all these things that I'm hearing about. It doesn't matter to me if I'm not having revival in my home, because my I do meant that I was going to be the spiritual leader of my home, and it also meant that that's my yes. It meant that that is more important to me than anything else that I have going on in my life. My home and my marriage and ministry there is first priority. My marriage and my kids and raising kids in a godly way isn't a second-class ministry. I may not be able to sit here and say I've led 1 million people through a born-again experience to Jesus, but I want to stand here in 20 years and say
that I demonstrated God in such a way that my daughters were attracted to a man that revealed God also. That's what I want to say. I want to say that raising children and raising a home and pouring into your marriage, where are the prophets calling out husbands? Where are the prophets calling out wives, calling out grandmas and grandpas and moms and dads? Where are the prophets saying that your best ministry is going to be your home? Where's the prophets calling out purity for single people? We're prophesying everybody to go to all these nations and do all these things and pour out an anointing in an office, and as in like an office of apostle, prophet, all that. We're calling those out, and we're calling out those destinies. But where are the offices of home? And then we look up to these people who are traveling all over the world, and we're looking up these people thinking that's the grid that we're setting ourselves up for. But what we don't know is the years of that and what it's done to their home and their kids and their lives. So, our heart this year is that we actually demonstrate what Jesus intended for the earth, what Jesus intended for a marriage, what Jesus intended for a home, what he intended for a family. Like, in the beginning, started with a family in the garden. In the end, a groom returns for a bride and ends with a family. And anything in between is a family. Our model is heaven. The culture that we want to see on earth is the one that's in heaven. That's family. If you look at it, and when he cleansed the earth and when he basically almost did a restart, it was with a family. It was Noah and his wife, his kids and their wives. It was with family again. Abraham and Sarah were fathering and mothering, literally fathering nations, right? It's family, but yet we want to create things and make them into organizations or businesses or entities rather than just keeping it the model of family. So we're incredibly passionate about this thing. We're incredibly passionate about making sure that, first off, we're number one. Use my tissue for your gum. It's minty.
Last time he got me one. This time he didn't give me a tissue, so.
We're incredibly passionate about our girls feeling like they're the most important human beings in our life. That Nicole actually feels like she's more important than the TV that night, or that she's more important than the phone call or the emergency that I'm going to deal with in somebody else's life. Like, our kids and the people that we're closest to deserve the very best of us. And by the way, we have kids, so a lot of our experience and a lot of what we're going to come from today is kids. You can replace that with the people closest in your life. Maybe it's friendships, maybe it's family, maybe you're single. Just replace that with the loved ones you have. So, but why is it that we give them the shortest end of the stick? That, what kind of dad would I be, or husband, if I come home from work and they get the yelling dad, or they get the dad that has no time for them when I've poured out all my time to everybody else in the day? Or what kind of dad or husband am I if my girls, they love hearing me at the 9 a.m. and they sometimes ask at the 11 a.m., can we sit in and skip our class? The kids ministry here is really amazing, but my girls just love hearing me. And it's why? Because they know the person they're getting up here is the same person they're getting at home. I don't put on some show and put some on some facade to make it seem like I'm perfect and I'm this amazing guy right here, and then I'm a butt face at home. Sorry, I use slang, okay? If that's all the worse it gets today, you're okay. Like, seriously, what would it do in their life? What would it do in their future if the preacher they looked up to, the pastor, who they looked up to, the guy who's raising them, is an absolute idiot at home, but brags about how great he is here? Listen, that's the worst thing we could ever do. But what happens is, and I'm guilty, what happens is we tend to treat the people we love the most the worst. And we tend to give them like the short end of the stick because we've already used our energy all day long out elsewhere. So what we're going after this year is really portraying who God is by who we are and who he is in us. In Colossians 1, around 25 or 27, it says that it's Christ in us, the hope of glory. I want my daughters, and I want Nicole, and I want all of you to actually see the Christ in me living out, even when I'm squeezed, even when bad things are happening, even when stress is happening at work. When I'm squeezed, am I becoming an idiot, or am I becoming a guy full of the fruits of the Spirit, like love and joy and peace and gentleness and kindness and meekness? Like, those are the things that when I'm squeezed, what's going to come out? It's whatever's inside of me. So that's the intro. What you got, babe? Billy Graham was asked this question recently, a couple of years ago. Well, if there's one thing you could do in your life different, what would you do? Now, Billy Graham, he's led more people to Jesus than anybody but Reinhard Bonnke. And this is the guy who says, if there's one thing you could do, what would you do different? You know what his answer was? Well, no, listen, this wasn't a guy that said he wanted to fill up more coliseums or arenas or stadiums. It wasn't another television event. It wasn't to lead another million to Jesus. His answer literally was to spend more time with the Lord and more time with my family. It's his only regrets. He's 90-some years old now. A hero to me. Hero to many people. But his only thing he'd do different is spend more time with his kids, family, and God. That's something to be notable. Like, I don't want to look back. There's this book called Dash. And it's talking about the time in between your birth and your death. And I'll just be honest with you. Like, for me, legacy is a big deal. But for me, it's not about what I'm leaving my kids for them. It's what I'm leaving my kids in them. My legacy means everything to say what I'm going to leave in them, not for them. That changes everything. We're not going to leave them much money. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Unless I die in the next couple years, because I got a ton of life insurance right now. But down the road, that's going to expire. But here's the deal. I'm not going to leave them much money. Plus, there's 4 to split it. It's not like that's going to go far after taxes. But what I'm going to leave in them, you know, and that's where our heart is today, is like cultivating in our home the revival, the culture, the legacy that we want to see. Let me just, I'll go with these 2 verses, and then Nicole can speak. I will let her speak today, I promise. You weren't in here to start, so I just went for it. 1 Timothy 3:5 says this. It says, for if a man cannot manage his own home, how can he manage in the church? Another version might say, if a man can't rule his own home, how can he rule in the kingdom? You know, this is a big deal to us. It's a big deal that we actually get to have fun doing this in our home, almost like the 4 girls are our guinea pigs before we get to blast you with some of this fun stuff. The other verse in the Bible, it says in Matthew 16:26, it says, for what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world, but he loses his soul? And then it asks this last question, or what will a man exchange for his soul? What are we willing to sell out to? Is it a title? Is it these things? And I'm just going to push you a little bit and proud. The Bible talks about a spouse being bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, right? Our kids come from that. So the reality is that, Nicole, as we leaved and cleaved to each other, we became one. All right, so now our souls are actually connected. We are one. So then our children are birthed from that, and now they're part of our soul. So what is it to gain all of this? What is it to gain all of this ministry, all these accolades, these titles, lieutenant at the fire department, all these other things? What is it to gain that if we lose our souls, our marriage, our wives, or our kids in the process? We know tons and tons and tons of really top-known ministers and friends with many of them. And it's this crazy thing to see, like what happened? I'm not going to go down this rabbit trail long. But what happened to Katy Perry? What happened to Mumford? You know, these are people in our culture that their parents were pastors and leaders of a church, movements. And now they're numbing pain, and they're doing, like, you know, it's not a fear of ours, but we know it's a possibility because our kids aren't exempt from temptation. And let me just give you this news flash. Ding, 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 ding. Our kids aren't going to be perfect for you. Don't hold them to that.
did this the last time, and I'm just like, but.
We had a different plan going into this one.
So, well, I will follow up on that. I didn't hear what you said at the beginning, but I don't know if he really touched much on just the value for representing the Father. Did you mention that? Like,
I don't know.
Okay.
It's very possible.
Like he carries like a very heavy pressure, or it's just a very heavy desire of his to represent the Father well. Because for our children and even for me as a spouse, that is our model. We talk about it a lot. Inevitably, children and wives, like the kids look at their dad, and that's like kind of the picture of God. Because at their age, when we talk about the Father, what do they picture? They picture their father. And so we do talk about that a lot. And I just think, one of the things I was thinking of earlier today was just that there is not a pressure. Like that pressure is to be lifted. And I don't think that he really carries like a heavy pressure for that. It's just a priority. And so there's a difference in that. And so I just want to encourage the guys
really good.
That it's not a pressure, but it is a priority. And that is the best thing that you can do, is just to represent the Father well to your children and represent a spouse, for your wives. And so in that, for me, that doesn't leave me off the hook, because just kind of what I've learned over the past several years is just the role that the mom plays in, kind of similar to the role of the Holy Spirit. And that is in nurturing and in comforting and things like that. And for me, that's not necessarily, I'm not going to tell you that I'm gifted in that, because I'm more of like, let's just get things done. So you're hurt, you feel better, let's move on. Like, it's really hard for me. And so I just, as I'm processing and journeying through that, like, there is very much value in taking time and nurturing and comforting and things like that, because there again could be a disconnect in like, your kids' relation to the Holy Spirit. Like, what does the Holy Spirit look like in their life? And so for me, that's just something just to encourage the moms with. Like, we get a role in this too. And even being a comfort and an encourager to our husbands, an affirmer, and putting ourselves to the side and lifting them up and affirming them and caring for them and encouraging them and that type of thing.
But not when I'm sick.
No. Because why would you risk yourself? Why would you risk being sick?
She's terrible nurturer when I'm sick. She literally wants, open the door. I'm like, got the flu, I'm in bed, and she opens the door, a little crack. All of a sudden I see a Lysol can come through the crack. And about 3 minutes later, she removes the can. I'm going to my mom and dad's with the kids. I'll see you later. That was the nurture. True story.
It's not that bad when it's involving the children. I'm a little better with the kids.
She is better with the kids.
Still. I got to stay strong so that everybody else can stay strong. But one of the things that goes along with like kind of what we're going after for this year is just something that's always been in us and something that we've talked about a lot, but not that we've necessarily really like honed in on it or made it a priority or tried to figure out what role we play in seeing this come to happen. And that is we just want and so desire, and obviously Hadassah's 3, but that doesn't mean she's exempt from this, but we just desire for our kids to just have an incredible, unforgettable, life-changing encounter with Jesus. And for me, it's when Jamie Van Gelder was here a couple weeks ago, he said, I am jealous for my children to have an encounter like I did. And it's like, it's so important that we remember, like, our kids they could, but I don't want them to serve their parents' God. I want this to be something that is theirs. It's personal to them. I want them to be able to say, that moment, I remember that, and that changed my life. And so for us, that's just something for this year that we're trying to figure out. And that kind of goes with, like, cultivating it in the home and opening up doors and opportunities for them to experience that.
And the other thing we want is we want the culture of heaven in our home and everywhere we are. So
if it's the culture that we're going after, it therefore becomes the culture that's all around us, including our church, our work, our home, all these things, because it becomes the atmosphere in which we carry. So the culture that you're hungry for and the culture that we're longing for, we want to see the culture of heaven where there's not strife, there's not jealousy, there's not gossip and discord. It's like literally we get to share our feelings and just go after this. Now, it's not to say hardships don't come. You know, we realize that. But what happens is there's such a grace. And let me give you an example. Like, hardship came last night after a birthday party, and I started yelling at Chloe to start cleaning up, and she was humming and wouldn't acknowledge me. She turned 11, so now she's got big girl things that she's consumed with. So anyway, she just, I asked her a question, and she still just keeps humming. And it made me so mad. I'm like, you didn't even respond. So anyways, I kind of lose my cork a bit. And but then what came later was...
Because we're not perfect.
Yeah, we're not perfect.
We're not. Us being able to, I just want to say that, I don't know if he said this, but us sitting up here and sharing our heart, there's not an intention at all to make you think that we've figured it out or that this is perfect and that this has walked out in perfection every day, because it is definitely not.
Just so you know, every once in a while, Nicole and I have a pretty heated conversation. We fight too. We lose our cool with our kids. You know, I won't say the other thing that's coming to my mind. I wipe my butt too, okay? Said it. Couldn't hold it back. The thing is this, but yeah, we spent a half hour then working on our connection. We spent a half hour sharing our feelings. We spent a half hour figuring out what hurt her and what hurt me, because that's important to us, you know? So the culture is really important to us. So we need to live it so that we can actually become it. Then it becomes the atmosphere around us. You know, there's people that are asking, like, how do we do what we're doing? How do you work full-time at a fire department? How do you pastor full-time at a church? How do you have 4 daughters and do all the other things you do? And how do you hunt and get a giant buck this year? How do you do all that? And it's honestly, we are learning and calculating our yeses and our nos. And what that means is, for instance, say somebody texts me today, like, hey, want to do coffee? Now, if there's no emergency and it's just to connect, yeah, it might be a week, 10 days, maybe even 2 weeks, depending on what we have going on in the next couple of weeks. But, you know, then if a Micah, though, says, hey, I'm really going through a problem right now. I really need some help. All right, you available tonight or tomorrow? Like, calculating that yes, what is the power of that? Because if I say yes to this, I'm saying no to something else. So how do we do it is we honestly just calculate our yeses and our nos, and we're learning that. We're still in process. So some of the other things is like being, what is that book you read? Present over perfect? Like being there. Like loving the person that's right in front of us. That's a big deal. You want to talk about the one thing that you...
Just one thing that I feel conviction on a daily basis is, this can apply to every single situation in our lives, but that is just engage with the one in front of you. Engage in the conversation that's in front of you, and eye contact, and actually responding with words rather than just like, oh, yeah, okay, cool. Because, like, for me, 340 hits, and, you know, you've heard me talk about this, that's game time. And they get off the bus, and they all have things to say. And they all have book bags, folders, papers, agenda books. I want to make sure I see everything. I actually want to engage in their papers. I want to know about their day. And if they're willing to share and talk, I want to listen, because I don't know if 5 minutes from now they're going to be quiet, or in 5 years they may not ever say another word to me. And so for me, it's more like the temptation is, let me flip through all this stuff, pitch that, keep that, okay, sign the agenda book, put it back in the book bag, take your book bag to your bedroom, empty your water bottle, all this stuff. That's the temptation. But the reality is, as I'm doing that and they're telling me all of this stuff, if I'm flipping through that and I'm like, good, oh, wow. And I'm acting like I'm there, but I'm really not. They know it, they pick up on it, and then they realize, like, you don't really care. And I want to engage, and I want them to know that I do care about your bicker with whoever on the playground. It's important to me because it's important to you. And so just in that, like, all the time, we'll tell each other a lot of times, like, come on, we'll look at each other, like, we gotta press in, we gotta push, let's go. Like 8 o'clock bedtime, and then there's like all 5 more stories they each have. And we're like, we're like, come on, push, let's push in. And so just that's so important, not just with your children, but with your spouse and your employees and your friends, and just that is just so critical.
Yeah, there's a verse in the Bible that says, Philippians 2:4. It says, don't just, what's it say? Don't look out just for your own interest, but look out for the interest of others. Another version that I remember constantly is, be interested in the lives of others. So how many have had a conversation here? You're engaging. Even somebody may ask you a question, and then you're explaining the answer, and then you see the eyes drift off, or looking at somebody else in the room or out the window. Anybody ever had that? Irritates the snot out of me. Like, I will just start babbling about nothing if I realize they're totally disengaged. I'll be like, yeah, then the purple elephant jumped over the moon and grabbed a dog with a tutu on it, and they're like, yeah. Glossy eyes, I see it. So just being really intentional. And the reality is, like, put away the cell phones. Put away social media. Real life with real people are happening right in front of you. Turn off the TV. Engage. Now, we watch television now and again, and isn't it a bummer the Olympics are like hardly ever on a channel that we get? We don't have cable, so it's like it didn't even come on last night till 8, and then it was figure skating. But anyway, it's like, come on, I don't get NBC Sports. So anyways, put away the stuff. Like, there's real little human beings in your house. There's a real spouse next to you. There's a real person that wants to be your friend, or your coworker. Like this is real stuff. Quit looking at the filtered versions of life through people in the lens of Instagram. Real life's happening, and we're guilty of this.
But I'm going to just say that sometimes doesn't that just feel therapeutic? So if you are able to do that, I'm not giving you permission to be on social media all your life, but I'm just saying sometimes I just love just to sit there and just, and I'm not trying to live through anybody else's life.
It's true.
And everybody else is in bed,
It's
and I'm not
mindless
choosing that over. I'm
activity.
just saying, did anybody else agree? Like, I'm like, we just need social media time, and we'll sit for like 20 minutes. We don't say a word to each other. We're just ding.
We do. It still annoys me, especially like if we're driving in the car and I look over, I was like, how's everybody else's lives doing? So you can ask me a question about my week or something. So anyway, we're not opposed to it. It is like some television shows, like we love The Office, and it's like mindless, effortless entertainment. And I get it, all right? But not at the cost of our family, our marriage, or our kids. Yeah. Or somebody else. Like, I won't forsake that. We're working on that one. I'm guilty too.
This is what I said in the first service, because whenever he's on it, it's important. Like, whatever he's doing is really important. So it's okay.
Saving lives, leading people to Jesus, brah. All right. Okay, we're going to give you just a list of things that we do. This is not something that you have to do. You should do. We don't really care if you do it. These are things that we have found that help cultivate a culture of connection in our home. So we're going to read through them quick. I'll probably copy and paste them on our Facebook group page. If you're not part of that, ask to be a part. But anyway, there's some things that we've created traditions around or created priorities